Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carolyn Cavecci, and I am the CEO and President of the Orange County Taxpayers Association. And we're so thrilled that you're here with us today for our last edition of OC Tax Talk for 2020. If you hear me start to cough, please, I am not feeling ill. I was just talking with our guest today, and the staff here at OC Tax saying I inhaled a granola bar the wrong way just about 10 minutes ago. Not a good thing to do before you go on air, but I'm having a little bit of cough coming up. But I'm so pleased to welcome today someone that I have had the pleasure of knowing for quite a while, and that is Mr. Will Swaim, who is the president of the California Policy Center. That is the actual name. Thank you so much for being here today.
What a pleasure.
And I want to say, I remember when you were with the OC Weekly.
Yes.
Which was, how long ago?
Started in 1995, and I was there through 2007.
All right. You know, it's amazing because I always talk to people and I always say that I think some of the best journalist research journal articles came out of the OC Weekly during those times. You had an incredible run of some really good investigative journalism.
Yes, we did. It's one of those moments where in retrospect you can see historically that was a rare time in journalism. I sort of came in at the end of the golden age of journalism, really, and I was very lucky. And then, you know, we had the backing of the Village Voice in New York and the LA Weekly, and the staff just assembled itself. Yeah. Great people came to work with us.
Yeah, a lot of people kind of rolled their eyes at it a little bit, but like I said, you're one of my favorite writers.
Oh,
so
I
always love when I see you in the Orange County Register, and you literally did an article just recently on some of the shenanigans in San Clemente.
Yes.
And I have to laugh because some of the people...
Dana Point, I think you remember. Yeah.
Was it Dana Point? I don't know, but I literally was gasping out loud reading that article. Yeah. People around here were laughing at me because I couldn't believe it out loud. So.
It was fun and terrifying, as all good investigative journalism
all at the same time.
Yes.
All at the same time. Well, before we start talking about where California is right now, politically and policy-wise, tell us a little bit about the California Policy Center.
Sure. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, which is a fancy way of saying we're basically a charity.
Yep.
And our work is to investigate public finances, specifically with an eye toward examining what I would regard as the injurious role of government unions. So we're talking here about cops and firefighters and teachers and the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, the people who staff the DMV. The individuals are almost invariably great people. They're fellow Californians. They do good work for us. As a group, collectively, as a union, they are the most formidable force in California politics.
Yeah.
You and I can get into the details here, but the bottom line is CPC, California Policy Center, is set up to really look at the nexus of the government unions and government power.
Interesting. Yeah, my big problem right now is with EDD. So, in the we'll have to maybe talk about that a little bit later when we get to Sacramento and what's going on, and that's the employment. All the unemployment claims that are coming in. There's been a lot of articles about the people incarcerated doing all those claims.
Yes.
So millions.
We're talking about up to $1 billion in fraud right now. $1 billion.
Lovely.
And the people who oversee that system, not to get too deep into the story yet, Javier Becerra, our Attorney General, now apparently being drafted to go run the Department of Health and Human Services in Washington, D.C. So what could go wrong?
In the middle of a pandemic.
In the middle of a pandemic.
Lovely. Well, let's talk a little bit about the federal. This has been an interesting year. It's been an interesting 4 years. I mean, I was personally, and you might not have been, but I was kind of surprised at how close the presidential election was. I thought it would be a more decisive win in either direction, but I didn't really think about that the country was so split down the middle as it is now with a popular vote. Have you any thoughts, or was it what you expected?
Yes, I think everything I was reading led me to believe that, contrary to sort of, I'll say, Democratic Party versus Republican Party propaganda, let's say, that the country's fairly evenly split. I look at my own family. I don't know about anybody else out there, but, you know, holidays, limited as they are right now, mostly to Zoom calls, but even those can be fraught political conversations. And we're people who love each other, you know, so unbound from that personal affection, I think a lot of Americans, certainly here in California, we simply have not been presented with a compelling, unifying vision for the future. And I think that's on us as political leaders, as political participants, as citizens to help create that unifying vision. The one thing that's disastrous in this, of course, is the vilification of people who disagree with us.
Right.
Whether you're on the right or the left, watching people say that we're in the middle of a civil war or the other side means to destroy America.
Right, taking up arms.
Yes, this is a problem. That's something I don't want to see. I'm otherwise not troubled by people disagreeing on important policy issues, and I think if people disagree with me, it's because I'm either an ineffective communicator or they're just not willing to listen, or both, right?
Yeah, although in this case, I have found, President Trump seems to have such a hold on a very strong base of the Republican Party right now. Unlike anything I've seen in a while. And it's interesting because, again, one of my kids, one of my adult kids, works in elections administration. And so I have a pretty strong belief in our system. And plus, here in Orange County, Neil Kelly is a registered voter. You really can't ask for anybody with more integrity or intelligence running our election system. I'm having a hard time with friends, especially on Facebook, who just truly believe that there was mass conspiracy, but aren't willing to even look at the potential on the other side. So that's been a struggle for me, especially with some friends on Facebook. They're not willing, no matter how maybe intelligent or persuasive I think I might be. There's just a no. Stephen Greenhut actually had an interesting op-ed recently in the Register, and I actually emailed him and said, wow, you really nailed how I'm thinking. And I was even surprised at he said the spewing he got on him for even writing that.
Right.
So do you think that, I don't know, I'm just kind of
well, can I jump in?
The future here? Oh, please, yes.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the most impressive thing about our system of government in California, in the United States, and in fact, not just the system of government, but our election system, shows how difficult it is to hack this system. In 2016, we heard, oh, the Russians hacked the system. Donald Trump is a plant. He's a troll for the Russians. He's a mole for the Russians. And there was this nonsense that somehow a single entity in Washington or somewhere could hack this very decentralized system. I'm reminded of the old Will Rogers line about political parties. He said, I'm not a member of an organized political party, I'm a Democrat, right? I'm not a member of an organized political system either. America is a very decentralized, very unruly, by design, a very difficult to govern kind of system. That's the design. The design is to hedge authoritarians and autocrats. And I would argue that watching the president try to make up stories about how the election was ripped off, and when one story fails, there's another one behind it. And when that story fails, there's another one behind that. So that now he's stabbing in the back people in his own party. You know, the Republican governor of Georgia, the Republican secretary of state in Georgia. It's fun and terrifying simultaneously to watch the system get tested and to see it survive, not just because the system is great, but because of the real independence and courage of individuals to stand up. That's always been necessary. What is it Benjamin Franklin is supposed to have said? We've got a republic if we can keep it. Right. Well, this year we've been tested severely. So I think it's a minority of people who believe the election was stolen. There's I think, much more sophisticated analysis of what really happened. It's quite simple. It accounts for a whole bunch of factors. The election was not stolen. America is a very steeply divided society. Lots of money poured into this election, more than ever before. Republicans did very well at the state level, just kicked butt. Interest of full disclosure, I'm not a Republican, I'm a conservative. And I love watching the fact that the House was supposed to go so blue. It did not. That the Senate was going to get turned. Only Donald Trump could make it turn now at this point toward the Democrats, and he's doing a darn good job in Georgia. And here in California, we had four House seats go Republican again. They flipped. This is, if you're the Republicans, you hope that Donald Trump goes quietly into the good night and that the Georgia election goes the Republican Party's way, and we have a Senate controlled by the Republicans, which might provide a kind of a break on the worst excesses of a otherwise one-party government.
Yes, and I'm a big believer. I don't like one-party governments. I like it when one house is controlled by another political party.
You like split government?
I like split government. I think government, I like when it works slowly and deliberately.
Yes.
I like it. That's my favorite type of government. And my concern is in Georgia, you start hearing in the press, you have a lot of Republicans saying, well, why should we even vote? Because
and I'm hearing this from my friends on the ground there.
Because it's just going to get swayed the other way. That's a dangerous thing. So do you think President Trump is going to quietly kind of go back to being a businessman, or do you think his hold on the GOP nationally, there's going to be a hold for several elections to come?
The president's whole biography is to push as hard, his business biography is push as hard as he can, no matter how outlandish it sounds, and then settle for something less, to strike a bargain, if you will. So I think in this case, he's striking a bargain. A lot of the fundraisers that I've seen for his legal efforts are actually efforts to fund his 2024 run or something like it, to pay off debts incurred in this current election. They're really not to pursue legitimate legal aims. I mean, if you really read the fine print, and if you look at the track record for these lawsuits. So do I think he'll go quietly into good night? Absolutely. I think otherwise he risks arrest by federal police.
It could be interesting. And you are correct, though, here in Orange County. The OCGOP did very well. We took two, I should say we, I shouldn't say we, because I'm not a registered Republican either anymore. See, I'm coming out on Facebook. I am also a conservative, but not a registered Republican. But the OCGOP took back 2 seats. Michelle Steele was elected, and Young Kim was elected. Do you think that those seats are going to stay Republican for a while, or do you see it's going to be going back and forth for a while? What do you think about that?
Well, I think certainly Michelle Steele's seat seems to be very Republican. Young Kim just seems like the right candidate in the right place at the right time, and I think things can change. A lot of stuff changed in 2018. If you're asking me to be a hostage to fortune, sure. I think that both those seats are safely conservative seats. It's one of the myths, I think, that both Republicans and Democrats, conservatives and liberals tend to agree on, and I think they're both wrong. And that is that demography is destiny. I don't think there's any expectation that Asian Americans, for instance, are going to just fall in line lockstep with Democrats. I don't think there's any logic to the fact that if you're Latino, you're going to vote Democrat forever. It just doesn't happen that way. The history of America is frequently that second and third generations veer off from the policies of their forebears. So I see lots of running room for Republicans, especially in a state that is as badly governed as this one.
Right.
And if I'm running for House, even though that's a federal seat, I'm pointing to San Francisco, to Sacramento, to LA, and saying to my constituents here in Orange County, that what you want?
Yeah.
Now, looking at that in, 2018, when we had the option of electing Gavin Newsom as our governor, all I had to do was look at San Francisco and the mess he'd created there and say, do I really want that for all of California? Well, the majority of Californians looked at San Francisco and said, yeah, let's double down. I'll have more of that, please.
I don't understand. So let's talk about California, and let's talk about Governor Newsom. What do you think? He's been in office now a few years. What do you think about his governing style?
A catastrophe. I mean, seriously, I don't know how else to put it. This is a man who has been wrong on every single issue. And let me stipulate all of this by saying being a governor must be hard. It's got to be hard. I think that it's one of the most difficult positions, especially if you have a COVID epidemic that I think he has responded to very badly. And you say things that are totally terrifying and infuriating to many people about that COVID epidemic. Then you lock down the economy. You cut off sales tax revenue to most of your city governments and your county governments. This man has created a catastrophe in what would be a difficult situation for anybody. Add to that his hypocrisy on the COVID lockdown, and I'm not only talking about showing up at the French Laundry restaurants.
Would we all love to go to the French Laundry?
Wouldn't we all?
Yes.
I'm not a populist who believes shame on him for going to a fine restaurant. I'm a person who's angry as anybody would be for a governor who says we have to forego gatherings with our families, being with our loved ones, but he's going to go to the French Laundry and hang out with lobbyists.
Right.
That's a problem.
Yep.
Sheila Kuehl, you could add it up in LA County. London Breed. Then there was a story in the Sacramento Bee yesterday about 5 other Democratic.
After the swearing in, yes.
After the swearing in, they all marched off to a downtown restaurant and hung out together.
Right.
They all had great excuses.
Yeah.
But back to Gavin Newsom. He has mismanaged our energy system in a way that got Gray Davis recalled back in the day, for those of us old enough to remember. And simultaneously, while he is blaming the utilities for burning down our forests, we can talk about that, he's doubling down on all electric vehicles. So where's the electricity going to come from to run these electric vehicles? If not from the utilities he blames for causing the wildfires.
Right.
There's multiple contradictions there that are just fun to play with. But with wildfires, he's been dumb on forest management. You know, we know that the government in Sacramento, along with the federal government, helped shut down a vital industry in California, the lumber industry. And with it, the kind of forest management that would have, I think, at least limited the disastrous fires we've had in the last 5 to 10 years. But Gavin Newsom has doubled down on that as well, caving into environmentalists who say you can't chop down a tree or haul one out of a forest without destroying Mother Earth. So I could go on. You know, the tax policy that he has signed off on, his efforts to support union power, his unwillingness to really crush the unions when they try to shut down charter schools. I could go on and on. But this is a governor who ought to be indicted, I think, almost for criminal negligence. Friends of mine who are conservative say, look, I believe in democracy. Who is it who said this? Lord Chesterton, maybe? I believe in democracy, that people should get what they want and get it hard.
Yeah.
But I'm also a guy, and so therefore, no recall. But I think that the dangers of waiting another 2 years with this man in power are so severe, we can't afford to wait. So I'm a supporter of a recall.
Yeah, you know, it's been difficult with these shutdowns. I think small businesses are just struggling. And what I've been really, what's really struck me is just the, and candidly, I think being a governor, there can't be any more, to me, more interesting job for somebody who's really involved in public policy and wanting to serve. To be governor, in my book, that would just be the ultimate job for somebody who really wants to get their hands dirty and try to make a difference for their state and for their community and work with local governments. But it's the moving, this shutdown, it's the moving of the targets. And I think we're on our third iteration now of these are what the new requirements are, these are what the new targets are. And I get in the beginning of a pandemic, you know, that maybe we don't actually know what's happening or know what's going to be good. But at this point into it, you know, the governor should have a pretty good idea, and that's been frustrating to me, these shutdowns. You know, are you hearing from businesses? I mean, here in our community, you know, we're trying to make a big point. I've been shopping local. I've dined out more in the last couple months or ordered out more because my husband has been really big on we're supporting the restaurants in the city of Orange. We're going to do this. Are you hearing from businesses at all about how this shutdown is impacting them?
I'm sure you're hearing the same things I'm hearing up and down the state. You know, we have a governor who has launched his AG on 100 lawsuits, literally 100 lawsuits against the Trump administration while COVID burns through the society. We have a knuckle-headed, phony science, I will say this. And look, I'm a guy who masks up, I wash my hands, I socially distance, I try to avoid crowds where I can. My daughter was one of the very first people in Orange County to get COVID, long story short. So the disease hits particular populations in a very specific way in very specific kinds of places, and yet we have a one-size-fits-all lockdown order right now. So we could dig into the details of that, but let me just say that yes, what's happening is the governor has, I think, stupidly, blockheadedly shut down business and the impact, and not just business, but some government functions, for example, public schools. You cannot have an economy in which you've told everybody they can rely on public schools to be open, if for nothing else than for childcare, right? And then suddenly I'm supposed to go to work as either, you know, just to try to keep income coming to my family, but there's nowhere to pop my kids. My kids are going to be stuck at home. This cannot be good for our society, and it's a hindrance on the economy. But the governor, again, one size fits all, bowing to the pressure of the teachers union, let's shut the schools. If you'll give me a moment, I'll tell you, COVID does not hit kids at the same way that it hits adults. We know why. They don't transmit it in the same way that adults do. Therefore, the safest place for kids to be is around other kids. Now, adults need to be careful in the presence of other adults. So the most dangerous place in any school is the teacher's lounge. Does the governor, do the unions acknowledge any of this? Absolutely not. And so one major stumbling block for this economy has been the shutdown of schools all over the place. If I've got a job but I've got young kids at home, what am I supposed to do with this? Not everybody has the luxury that you and I have of being able to work from home. I work on a laptop and a cell phone. I could do that from my car. I've done it on the road. We all do. But if I have to show up at a certain place to get a certain job done and my kids are stuck at home, what are you supposed to do? It's bad for, and I cannot stand that the governor and his supporters argue that this is somehow not a trade-off. Their argument is, if we lock down, then everybody wins. No. Lots of people lose in very different ways. They lose income, they lose their homes, they miss their mortgages, they put banks in peril. Their kids are locked out of school with all kinds of knock-on social effects that we're all aware of. We've seen the data now on psychology and sociology with kids falling behind in school. Does the governor acknowledge there's a trade-off? Not really. No. He goes to French Laundry.
Right, right. Well, and then on top of everything else, the Employment Development Department, EDD, you know, when this first hit, you couldn't call in, there was no one answering phones. They show pictures of the mail piling up, people who, I think there are probably still a vast amount of people who can't get responses for them to even get their EDD payments because they have lost their jobs. So to me, again, if you're going to be doing this, then you concentrate on that department and you make sure that, you know, if you are going to be shutting and people aren't going to have work, those people are getting their EDD payments. But that was ignored as well, too, by the governor.
You raise a really great point. There's one more part of that bill of indictment that I'm talking about with the governor, that any one of these things ought to be enough to really to recall any governor. Right. The mismanagement of the unemployment system has been almost diabolical and at least catastrophic. So how is it that the governor proposes to manage this thing? I'm going to do an audit and I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Lots of statements about sincere desire to investigate. But meanwhile, we've got people in prison with massive, what do they call those little funds now that they can spend on drugs and other things in prison? Yeah. At the prison commissary?
Yes. Well, and they're actually using the iPads and the Surface Pros or whatever to actually apply for it themselves. So taxpayer funded. So that's been very frustrating for me as well. I don't see a change in what's happening in Sacramento going into, especially with, again, one party rule in Sacramento. I don't see a change. I don't see it. Is there anything we should be looking for?
Yes, there is. Okay, so one of the things the California Policy Center works on is, we call it worker freedom. And the fact is, in June of 2018, the Supreme Court decided in a very famous case, famous to me anyway, called Janus, Janus versus AFSCME.
Yes.
Mark Janus was a public employee in Illinois who one day looks at his paycheck as a state social worker, and it says that he's giving money to AFSCME, the American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees. Goes to his HR department. He says, "What the hell's this?" They say, "Oh, you're part of a union." He says, "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are. Read the fine print on your employment documents." So he went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, "Hey, state and local governments, you can't require your employees to belong to a political organization. Forget it. It's over." So in California, we immediately, under Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom, our legislature and the governor, put in a series of bills designed to protect unions against the Janus decision. CPC has helped, we're not alone in this, but we have helped about 250,000 public employees get out of unions. That means that government unions that raise about $1 billion a year have lost nearly 20% of their income because of the Janus decision. That's part of how you level the playing field. If you pull that $1 billion per year out of the political system the unions deploy, they did it on Prop 15, they did it on myriad other propositions this year. I know you worked a lot on Prop 15. The split roll tax policy. But if you start to pull union money out of the system, not by barring it or banning it or trying to prohibit freedom of speech, but by just saying to workers, wouldn't you like to have that extra several hundred or thousand or more dollars per year in your own paycheck? We've got 250,000 public employees who said, yeah, I'm up for that. I don't like my union. I want to keep my money. That's a nearly $200 million tax cut for working Californians who work in government, and it simultaneously deprives the union of money that they use in monkey business. So that's one reason to be hopeful. And I also think that conservatives are not the conservatives I grew up with. And no offense to my elders who deserve, great respect, but when I was a young man coming up in the 1980s in Orange County, some of our politicians, just a quick shout out here to Bob Dornan if he's watching from Virginia or wherever he is right now, people like Bob Dornan drove me out of the Republican Party. Their talk about women, their talk about minorities was reprehensible to me. They were exceptions in the party. I can see that now, but at the time that was loud in my ear. And when I went to the Weekly, as you may remember, we did a lot of work on good old Bob Dornan and on his successor, Loretta Sanchez, who did not appreciate our attention. But the bottom line is that the conservatives and Republicans in California, I think, have become a lot more, I'm going to say, really liberty-minded. They have decided, for example, I think, that they don't have to fight everybody on every personal choice somebody else makes. Interest of full disclosure, I'm a married guy with a house, with a mortgage on a house in Irvine and 4 children, all of them adults now. But I don't despise other people for making choices that are different from mine. That's what the Constitution is for. Right. That's what makes America great, is the ability of other people, not with my subsidy and me not with their subsidy, but with the freedom. They get to live their lives. I don't pay the penalty for the lives they live, and they certainly don't have to pay the penalty for the life I've chosen. But the fact is, or that my wife has chosen, God bless her. So, I really think that conservatives have become more liberty-minded. I mean, I might even say small L libertarian. California has always been a very liberty-minded kind of place. That doesn't mean that all people in all places were liberty-minded, and certainly the left, I would argue, has become more and more authoritarian in California. That's the target, the bullseye for conservatives and libertarians, for people who like personal freedom. The increasing authoritarianism of the Democrats, the mismanagement of the Democratic Party in this state, that's our bullseye. Watch that.
Interesting. Well, and at OC Tax, we really focus on taxpayer-funded programs, both at the state and the county level. Is what we do, and we're noticing we were very successful in helping to kill Prop 15. We're starting to see this pushback now against taxation. Los Angeles lost a big school bond, went down over the last year or so. Prop 15 was defeated. A lot of school teacher union money went in to try to get Prop 15 across the board, as well as Mr. Zuckerberg, which I don't quite understand that. That could be a whole nother program.
He's a child.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that. I'm serious. If I wish I knew as much as he thinks, I wish I knew half as much as he thinks he knows.
Yeah. So we're seeing, and I don't know if it's something that you're seeing as well, that even those who don't consider themselves conservatives, we're starting to see a little pushback on taxation.
I don't think I think that's my point. I don't think this is a conservative issue. I don't think freedom is. I don't think anybody likes to be told what to do necessarily. And I think taxes hit everybody. And that message came through loud and clear. You're right. There was a teacher strike in LA. The United Teachers of LA went on strike for 5 terrible days, just throwing the entire school district and all the parents into chaos. And they got the increase they said they wanted. Well, they got less than they were offered before. But long story short, they got an increase. And then they had to turn to the hard work of raising the money so the district, LA Unified, doesn't go bankrupt. This is all in early 2019. So they put Measure EE, I think it was called, on the ballot, and it was a parcel tax. And you're right. I was as shocked as anybody when that thing went down. Because basically what they were telling the teachers union was, look, you can work out whatever deal you want with the district, but I'm not paying for it. And this is in a Democratic city.
Yes.
With Democratic messaging constantly about the importance of raising taxes. And I talk to lots of very liberal, social justice-oriented progressives up in LA all the time. I have lots of friends and family who are on that side of the wall. They don't want to pay more taxes either. They understand that the cost of living is not just in California. If you want to know why we have homeless, if you want to know why our housing costs are out of control, why our utility bills are higher than everybody else, one thing you can look at is the cost of taxation. It is expensive to live here.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but when you talk to your friends in other states and you tell them what your property taxes are,
yes.
aren't they shocked?
Yes.
Like it's a mortgage payment.
Yes.
They're shocked.
Yes.
Yeah. So my kids are moving out all over the country and all over North America, all over the world, because they cannot afford to live here.
Yeah.
That's a cost. That hacks at the roots of family, community, stability. My wife and I were counting on our little cubs being around us in old age. Now they're all over the country and all over the world.
Yeah. Well, when you think about retiring, do you think about retiring in California?
Look, here's the honest truth. Do I aspire to that? Sure. The way that a lot of people aspire to a beautiful, gigantic home with a view of the ocean.
Yeah.
Can I afford it? Unclear at this point.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people are making choices to vote for higher taxes here and then move to Idaho when they retire, right?
Yeah.
Those are the people who really frustrate me the most.
Well, we're seeing a lot of the tech giants are leaving,
Absolutely.
One after the other.
Elon Musk yesterday,
yes. Going to Texas, I think.
Moving to Texas. And right before him, Joe Lonsdale of Palantir, a massive company. His company's moving to Denver. He's moving to Austin. Poor Texas. So yes, I do a podcast for National Review called Radio Free California.
I love the name of that podcast. It's
so
great.
Much fun. And one of the things that we've created most recently is this little department we call the Book of Exoduses. And it's almost every single week some major company saying, we're out. Chevron up in the East Bay is now considering moving its headquarters down to Texas as well, to Houston, which makes a lot of sense. But we're losing. There's that old saying about, first you picked the apples, and when that wasn't enough, you chopped down the tree and burned it. So, we are doing that.
Right. So how I like to be positive. Sometimes I tend to be a glasses half empty kind of person. My friends just all kind of,
Glasses half full, you are.
No, I'm a glasses half empty.
That's a pessimist.
I know, and I want to be positive about California, and I keep telling myself that. With them, with everyone starting to leave, are we finally getting to that point? I mean, the way California's budget is based on, capital gains and personal income tax, there aren't going to be many of us left to pay that. There aren't many of us now paying it. Do you think we're finally getting to that place where people are going to say, "Oh my gosh, how are we going to pay for everything?"
It's unclear. At the time when we need them most, our younger people are typically really undereducated on basic economics. I spend way too much time on Twitter. I hate it. It's like my wife says, it's like bathing in a septic tank.
Yeah. Most social media.
And it is. But one of the things that I just find really intriguing on social media, whether it's Instagram or Twitter, is to look at the response, for example, to Elon Musk leaving, and the response from lefties, typically millennials, who will say something like, this is an outrage, he should stay here and pay his fair share.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? There's a thing called freedom.
Yes.
And there's a thing called capital flight. And when you start to make it impossible for wealthy people to live in a place, they're going to move. They do not have to stay here. There's not even a moral responsibility for them to stay here. You have killed the goose that laid the golden eggs. So there really are. We're at a crossroads, I think, and I'm not talking about a civil war. We're at a crossroads, though, ideologically and philosophically, and that is, are we going to trust the free market to do what it has done better than any other system in the history of mankind, and that is lift people out of poverty and give them a chance? Are we going to double down on the kinds of politics that chase capital out of our area, increase business regulations so that business startups slow down, that housing becomes more expensive? You can't find houses today in California unless they are quote unquote affordable, and that means a government subsidy that is generated through a tax, right? So their system is a closed loop, zero-sum game of steal from one person to pay for another. You alluded to the fact that a very small number of people pay taxes. 150,000 Californians, I am not one of them, I wish to God I were. 150,000 Californians pay the majority of our taxes, our income taxes in California. 150,000 people out of a population of 40 million. Say there's 20 million adults in California who could be paying taxes. 150,000 of them are paying most of our income taxes.
And they're leaving.
And they're leaving because they can. Part of my job is fundraising for California Policy Center. I can tell you almost every week I talk to one person at least, some weeks it's been 3, who tell me, gosh, I'm leaving the state. I'm going, one of them was going to Washington of all places. I mean, I can't think of Seattle as sort of the city on a hill, but a lot of them moving to Colorado, Utah, Arizona, Texas, Florida, Tennessee even. People are leaving. They're getting the message, and even if the governor is not, I make sure that I always tag the governor in my tweets about people leaving California. This is on him now. He can't blame Jerry Brown or Schwarzenegger before him or whomever. This is on him now. Okay,
so you and I, we're staying in California, even though out of my 3 children, adult children, only one is left. They're in Northern California. But my son-in-law is an attorney, and attorneys, it's hard to find jobs now, and he's not going to want to take the bar someplace else. But the other 2 found jobs in housing in other places.
Can I ask where?
Yeah, Arizona, and believe it or not, Washington.
Oh my gosh.
But it's where the job was.
Yes.
So came back, could not find a job here, and he went, that's where the job was, so he went back up to Washington. But so if political, we're going to vote, Californians are going to vote. Right now it's Democrat and Republican. Do you think the Republican Party, here's my glasses half empty type of person coming out again now. I just don't think that the Republican Party in California ever has a chance of making a resurgence enough to start electing statewide constitutional officers. And so what do you think about that?
Well, do you think it's because, I want to clarify, do you think it's because the brand is damaged?
Yes. Yes.
So talk to me about that if you don't mind.
Damaged brand. I don't see Republican Party, people who are like you and I, people who are conservative, or people who are socially liberal but are tired of stepping over poop in their street in San Francisco, going to the Republican Party. I just don't see it. I'm a big believer there needs to be a third party resurgence in the state of California. And it's going to take a while to get, but when you have NPPs, no party preference, equaling registered Republicans in the state of California.
And that's only recent
that
was equal, right? I mean, because before they were ahead.
They were
of the Republican
ahead and
Party,
they dropped down a little bit. But I wonder about the Republican Party, of them being able to come back. But I just look at the Democratic Party and I look at their bench of people coming up, and I don't know that I see anyone who could take on a Gavin Newsom. I just don't think a Republican candidate can beat Gavin Newsom in 2 years.
Well,
Are you?
I'm more hopeful.
You're more hopeful.
Yeah, I'm more hopeful. I'm not saying you're too pessimist, because I think a lot of people feel as you do. But if I felt that way, I wouldn't live here anymore.
Okay.
I'm much more of a King Henry V, once more into the breach, dear friends.
Yeah.
Let's go. What a great time to be alive.
Yeah,
or as our Celtic forebears would say, what a glorious way to die.
And
right?
I get that.
Yeah, so I think the fight makes us more interesting. When I say us, I mean people of even liberal persuasion, but who are really understanding what's at stake here now.
You think they'll vote for a Republican, though?
I think the right Republican, absolutely. The right Republican is not a person, and my friends on the right will forgive me for this, but the right Republican is a person who will create an even bigger tent.
Right.
The Republican Party for years was so successful in California, especially in a place like Orange County, that it could afford to alienate lots and lots of people, and it successfully did that like it was its primary business purpose. I am a huge fan of small L libertarianism, free market, free enterprise, personal liberty, letting people make their choices. I have my own choices that I make in line with the fact that I was raised a little Catholic boy and went to school at the Old Mission in San Juan.
Yeah.
Went to church at St. Kilian's in Mission Viejo. I was raised that way. That's just me, right? But I'm not insisting that other people do that. I have places where I would draw the line on social issues. Not a fan of abortion. Not a huge surprise to anybody because I'm a Catholic.
Right.
But I'm also opposed to the death penalty. I'm also a big one for believing that the greatest way to help the poor is through liberalizing, really unleashing free markets in California.
Amen.
And I think that there are candidates out there. I've been a huge fan of Tom McClintock, for instance, since
he was my gubernatorial during the recall that we both remember. He was my candidate.
That's right. And my left-wing newspaper, OC Weekly, had him on the cover, and we endorsed him.
Yeah.
Because he's a common sense. He's like a John Morlock figure to me. He's a man of indisputable integrity, clarity, and freedom. He's a smart policy guy. His staff is brilliant. Get him as a gubernatorial candidate. We have a choice, right?
Yep.
I know that John Cox is thinking about running again. San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer. Right.
I just think there needs to be something other than an R.
You may be right. I mean, there's a lot of people who agree with you. I'm only not an R because in my capacity, it's important not to be wedded to a party.
OC Tax is also a nonpartisan organization, so I understand that.
But I think as soon as I open my mouth, people get where my politics and where my heart is.
Me too.
So, I hope the Republican Party can grow up this way, but it's going to really have to invest in the hardest work imaginable. It's work that we do at CPC. We organize in low-income communities. Because you don't have to worry about the 25% or so of Californians who identify as a Republican. Like, they're going to vote for the guy with the R. We can almost invariably count on that. But what about people who don't really know who they like? Who say a box on both your houses, that big, decline, no party preference group. That's the place where the party can make a difference, is to begin going to talk to those people. Yeah. And I'm not wedded to the party. I never have been wedded to parties. Yeah. I think they serve a really important function, which has been broken over the last, probably since you and I were kids. The party system has been breaking down, and I think the reason that Donald Trump wins is because the party breaks down, right? And people could like that or hate it, but that's the case. So this party is breaking down rapidly in California. This recent election, I think they did well locally. Statewide, I'm unclear on the benefit of the party to conservatives, and I don't know whether an R can win in the face of $2 billion a year or more of union cash. Right. That's why it's important for people to reduce that union cash. Yeah. And I think when we vote as citizens, anytime you see a bond or a tax, you vote no. On the latest propositions, we have this new thing that sounds so great, a new government agency, the Consumer Personal Information Privacy Agency.
I was kind of surprised that one passed.
I'm not, because everybody likes to think, well, privacy, that's a good thing. Yeah. It just sounds good. So you
Yeah.
pull the lever for privacy. What you don't know you're doing is also creating a brand new agency.
We push that information
Yes.
out, yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you. So we've got a brand new government agency at a time when they can't even deliver, unemployment checks to the right people. We've got an agency that is going to protect your personal data. As I said on a radio interview up in LA, I said, with that promise, we're all going to be celebrities.
Yeah.
There's zero question, and not for good reasons.
Yeah. Well, we do have quite a few questions are coming in from people who are viewing. The first is from Nancy. Nancy Collins, and I think we answered some of this. Going forward, what will be the financial future for the state with so many taxpayers leaving and bleeding the economy? And we talked about that. Do you see an end to this all? We can only hope, I think. But this is part of the interest question. We're talking about propositions. Please speak to the passing of Prop 19. That was the one kind of tweak on Prop 13 that they were able to get passed. We were all, I think, so big on trying to keep Prop 15 from passing. I think Prop 19 kind of slipped through.
It did. Yeah, what 19 sold itself as, and I had Republican friends who voted for it, it sold itself as Prop 13 portability. At present in California, your Prop 13 value, if you will, is only, it's limited to the county you're in. For most counties in California, in fact. So if I move from here to San Luis Obispo County, I don't get to take my Prop 13 rate, my discount with me to San Luis Obispo County. So a lot of people like that portability.
Yes.
This thing created portability. No matter where you go, you take your Prop 13 tax limit with you, your property tax limit with you. But that was the sugar on a very bad poop cake.
Yep.
Because what came after that was an initiative pushed by the realtors associations, and that was to generate more sales and by the unions to create more tax revenue from personal property that is inherited. And yeah, there are fine points we could get into about how those, what the criteria are there, but the bottom line is, if you worked your butt off and built a home that you want to hand to your kids, if your kids can't immediately live in that home, the tax rate goes through the roof, unleashed from Prop 13. This is another death tax, and I don't think that's just some old term that people threw around just to make political hay. This is you trying to pass on something to another generation that you earned, and now you want to pass it on to your kids, and the government says, we'll take that now, thank you.
Yeah.
Tax is always theft. It's always tragic, and therefore we ought to limit it as best we can. Prop 19 was one little way of getting in the back door at reducing the protections we have against ever-increasing government, which always increases the appetite for new tax money.
Yeah, I'm hearing that there may be some legal challenges
I
to
hope
it.
so.
We'll have to see if they can find something in there to go after.
I'd love to
and
hear
again,
more.
I think we talked about the financial future of the state with so many taxpayers leaving. It's going to hit the wall eventually.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting question here. There isn't a name. It says Governor Newsom is working to eliminate most in-home use of natural gas by 2030. This is something I think it's going to be terrible. How will that work when most generators that power the grid and solar panels use natural gas?
This is a great point on myriad
Yes.
fronts, right? One of my favorite memes on social media is the electric, a car that looks like a Tesla hauling around its own coal-burning plant. Because the dirty secret behind electric cars is they're plugged into a grid that is generated, that is run on electricity. Some of it powered in other states where we don't have the environmental regulations we imposed on them that we do here. So yes, the idea of eliminating natural gas, right now I think the major bill in the legislature would actually just eliminate natural gas home hookups on new construction.
Right.
The governor has said he wants to eliminate it, I think, by 2035.
Okay, this is 2030
Could be.
here, but I don't remember when it is either.
Yeah, natural gas and fracking, the expansion of the natural gas economy have done so many great things for California, for America.
It's clean energy.
It is cleaner than coal,
Yes.
number one. Number two, it's less controversial than nuclear.
Yes.
Number three, solar hasn't worked, wind hasn't been reliable. That's why we have blackouts in
Right.
California, my friends, and it's why our electricity rates are so high. So natural gas has been a literal godsend to
Right.
us. It just happened to be here in the earth, and we found it here through modern technology. This is amazing. It also, I just want to put in a small point for fighting terrorism. Every time we go pump up our tanks, most of the time we're sending money to bad people. I just want to say, whether it was Venezuela in the old days under Hugo Chavez, or whether it's the Saudis or their buddies, oil is under some pretty nasty regimes, and this has untethered the U.S. from those regimes. They are not benefiting from our economy the way they used to. So knuckleheads who say shut down the natural gas economy are going to make worse environmental impacts, put the economy in a precarious position because electricity is far more expensive and unreliable. You're going to have to reverse engineer cars. I mean, ultimately, we're headed toward this economy that is, at this point, unproven, untested. It's not just a moonshot, as I heard a union activist say. You know, we did it in the 1960s. We landed a moon within 10 years just because Kennedy said so. No, we put a handful of people with a small amount of money from the federal government put some guys on the moon within 10 years. We didn't launch an entire state to the moon. We are trying right now to launch 40 million people and the 5th largest economy in the world onto the moon. I'm all for advancement in the free market. I am not up for these experiments in social design.
You know, in this natural gas question, it's something I think everyone in California really needs to pay attention to. Again, this is going to be where all of a sudden we look up one day and go, what the heck just
Why
happened?
Is there a blackout?
What the heck just happened to us? So it's a big one.
Yes.
Well, here's a question. We'll maybe switch a little bit to local races. With Michelle Steele being elected to the to Congress, there's a supervisorial seat up, and I don't know. You'd mentioned John Morlock beforehand. There are right now there are 3 Republicans that are in the race and 1 Democratic candidate in a special election. Are you guys looking at this yet, or have you personally looked at this?
Yeah, more personal because CPC doesn't get involved in politics.
Well, it asks here, what's your prognosis on whether this will be similar situation to Wagner versus Sanchez, more competitive, and what do you think the power shift of the Board of Supervisors might be if Democrat candidate was to win?
This is one of the, I think, the catastrophes of the decline of party politics. That the party used to be strong enough they could go out and sort of help people understand what their role was in the pecking order, and then the rest of us would vote on whomever they presented us with. I'm a John Morlock fan. I think that watching the prison guards union in this last election dump $1 million into the campaign against him.
Do you live in his state senate? Could you believe the amount of mail? I actually talked to John.
Every day, all day.
And it was more than one piece.
Yes.
It was multiple pieces.
Yes.
I could not believe the amount of mail.
So California, at a time when we needed a guy like Morlock. First of all, for those who don't know John Morlock, the only CPA in the state legislature. They're coming to get us.
Yeah, they are.
The only CPA in the state legislature dumped on by the unions just because they could. They had some extra cash lying around, the prison guards union did, and they dumped $1 million into a campaign to elect Dave Min, one of my neighbors, a UCI associate professor of law who has never held a public sector job of any consequence, in favor of a guy who was a CPA, helped Orange County out of the 1994 bankruptcy. We lost. We really lost. To have Morlock go back to the supervisor's seat would be an unintended blessing of this last disaster.
Wow. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to kind of see. John, one of the reasons I like John, and I served on the OCTA board. I was mayor here in Orange when he was on the Board of Soups, and we served together on the Orange County Transportation Authority board. He, like me, is kind of a financial policy, just a wonk, and likes to read every single piece of paper that's put in front of him and all of that. So, and I don't know that you see many of that.
No, you
like
don't.
That in Sacramento.
We have a 25-year-old from the Central Valley whose major claim to fame seems to be that he is a bisexual.
Right.
And I'm no offense taken or intended, but if this is your major claim, how you make love, that's your major reason for being in the State House, we have a problem.
Yeah.
Also, I didn't know much at 25. I wish I knew a lot at 25. I did not. That's not the guy we need in the state legislature right now. The State House got more radical. And I should say, in the interest of full disclosure, that John Morlock's former chief of staff while I was up there, a guy named Lance Christensen, who's a wonderful policy guy out of the Reason Foundation.
Yes.
Lance is coming to work for CPC, for California Policy Center in January.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. It's a huge get.
I worked with Lance before.
Oh, did you?
Over just, making calls and chatting with him and on policy and bills.
Yeah.
And I'm very impressed.
Yeah,
he's got a good brain.
Smart,
so good
smart
for you.
man. Thank you.
Good for you. Here's another local question. It's more about redistricting. With this supervisorial special and redistricting, it's all kind of happening at once. This is from Dave Simpson. With increased pressure on the Board of Supervisors to use an independent commission making the decisions versus the County Board of Soups, soups. For those who aren't aware, every 10 years with the census, thank you, we have to redistrict everything,
right.
and they will be redistricting the Board of Soups. What do you think about an independent commission here in Orange County?
Sort of terrified, I got to say,
yeah.
Because I think the whole process is so highly political everywhere. I'm not talking about just Republicans or Democrats. I'm talking about all of it. It
right.
is very political, and I can't think of a more important short-term, very near-term issue for Californians to make sure that they're represented. The incumbent power in California is going to insist on new district lines that really protect Democratic incumbents.
Right.
So we're going to see Republicans divided up into more Democratic dominated kinds of districts. The threat is such that I would argue the county is surrendering its responsibility if the supervisors allow this to go to some kind of independent commission. Okay. We elected those guys to solve
right.
these problems. This is their job
yeah.
to solve this problem.
Was the last time they did the districting back to after 2010 with the independent commission.
How did you like it?
Well, you know what? I went to the hearings. At the time, I was mayor in the city of Orange, and we had we were really split up. Tons of assembly
mm-hmm.
members, and I didn't find them all that independent.
Mm-hmm.
Candidly.
They're not. Yeah, I think calling it an independent commission is like calling China a republic.
Yeah.
It's fine on paper.
Yeah.
It means nothing.
Well, they pick the people they want,
That's
and
right.
then they can put their hands with it. Here's a specific question from John Merrill about the OC GOP Central Committee. Do you follow that very much?
Not closely.
Yeah, I don't either, but let's get the question
mm-hmm.
either. There was a fair amount of turnover on the OC GOP Central Committee this year. How do you see this affecting policymaking and the types of candidates running for local office in 2022? So what do you think? I'll broaden this question a little bit. OC GOP and the OC Democratic Central Committee endorses candidates, and money can get funneled through for, I'll call them independent expenditures, but it's party communication. What do you think about that? Do you think, obviously, I can answer this, it is going to affect the types of candidates.
Please, you answer it.
Because,
Don't be polite and throw it to your guest.
With the makeup of the thing, it's going to push who gets through. What do you think about local political party central committees, actually?
Well, I mean, they're a necessary function of a successful party.
Yeah.
And the question that I would
but
ask the central
local.
Yeah. Well, I think that's their job.
Okay.
That's almost the only job they really have left to them. They don't, I think, do a great job, and no offense intended to them. Watch the Democrats identify early talent, put those people on, I don't know, school boards or planning commissions, then run them for mayor, then run them for assembly or county. They know how to create a farm team. The Republicans, because the Democrats do this 24/7, they are the party of government, and government is the party of the Democrats. Republicans are people who really literally have day jobs. Most of us are not, most conservatives are not in this because we love government and we think that government is a great thing that ought to grow, or we see a future for ourselves in terms of careers. The people I interact with who are conservatives, they got jobs to run.
Yeah.
Man, they're active in their churches, their parks.
Mm-hmm.
They got families. They got a company to attend to, and a job to do. Having said all that, I think that the party could do a much better job at identifying early talent and making sure that they have clear messaging. And you and I have talked about some of these messages. One is never, ever, ever under any circumstances accept union money. You cannot. You cannot. That is a conflict of interest. It is a legalized corruption. You and I may disagree about this.
No.
Number two, no taxes, no bonds ever. If somebody starts to cozy up and say, well, we just need more revenue, you pull them out. Watch what happened if people want to look back at Tyler Deep, an assemblyman who got crushed in the last primary, in part because he supported Assembly Bill 5, was saying very nice things about government unions, and then showed up at the Anaheim City Council to decry the Republican Party and how unfriendly it was to workers. That guy needed to be taken out. And thanks to those who did, he's no longer in the assembly. No offense intended, Tyler, it's strictly business. So the thing I would really want to point out here is the party needs to be disciplined. And I have watched people, God bless him, but Dave Shaver up in Stanton has been a guy who has supported government unions up there, has taken their money, and then claimed he's a conservative. Dave and I disagree vehemently on this. He supported a tax increase. That's just wrong. So my sense is that you've got to have a party of principle. It's got to be a party of freedom. It's got to be a party of limited government. And when people stray from that because of some sort of practical near-term consequence of not doing it, they're off the team. They're gone. Bench them.
For you. Well, I think we have time for one last question. We'll just end on this. I'm becoming a little more glasses half full just talking to you. So we're going to have to do this probably
It's all the way full.
We're going to have to do this all the way full. So the future of California. I liked what you said about starting to disarm the amount of dollars that are going into the unions to try to level the playing field a little bit. So what do you think the future of California, the road that we're on right now, where do you see us?
If we stay on the road we're on, we're going to hell.
Right.
Maybe literally. I really do sometimes wake up and think, are we going toward Venezuela?
That is not a glass half full answer.
No, but those are my dark moments.
Yeah.
And I will say that the great thing about humans is our capacity to change. I mean, one of the most inspiring things to do is to watch how people trapped, whether it's in a sports situation or a political environment. I look at the poor people of a benighted country like Syria and how these people will still fight and struggle for freedom. Like, God bless those people.
Yeah.
How a small number of people on the eastern seaboard of North America fought off the largest imperial power in the world and won.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of the underdog sports movie and sports situation. This is who we are. I am a sucker for the underdog coming back to win. And I really do believe that in California, that spirit of enterprise that made this state so amazing is alive in everybody. Even government union leaders get that they're on the wrong side of history. They know this. And when you talk to them, they get it. Some of them even admit it's just a game. I'm not in it because it's a game. I'm in it because there's an existential threat to our entire state. Who doesn't want to be involved in a fight like that? What a glorious day to be alive, right?
All right. Yes, I'm with you. I'm with you. Thank you. Will Swaim, thank you so much for being here today. I think now everyone realizes why this is one of my favorite writers and one of my favorite people just to follow. Love what you're doing at the California Policy
Thanks so
Center.
much for your generosity.
No,
Thanks for
thank you
having
so
me.
very much. And with that, thank you all for being here for our final OC Tax Talk for 2020. We wish all of you happy holidays and a more successful and a prudent 2021 for all of us. And again, thank you so much, and we'll see you at the next one.
I love prudent. This is the most comfortable chair I've sat in a long time.
Wayfair